I'm coming at you live on tape from Sydney, Ohio. And we're talking the history of Wargames matches. Now, I should have talked about this last week before Survivor Series had Wargames matches, but I didn't think of it. My bad. So now we're talking about it this week. Now, yes, I know WWE had a history of Wargames matches on their website, but we're going to dive into stuff that WWE's website doesn't have up, and some of the other history of Wargames matches don't have up too. So the first Wargames match was, of course, in 1987 in NWA, and the Wargames match was thought of by Dusty Rhodes. Now, of course, we all know this because every other history of Wargames match has this information. He thought of it after watching Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and it is either a 3 to 5 person team in a double ringed cage with a top on it at the time. At the time, the cage had a top on it, and people enter one person at a time from each team, typically with the heel team getting the one-man advantage. When WCW left the NWA, they took the Wargames match with them. And they started doing their own in 1993. And continued doing their own up until 2000, when WCW did their last Wargames match. Now, when WWF bought WCW in 2001, Triple H really wanted to do a Wargames match, and he had backstage influence and was pushing Vince McMahon to do it. Vince, of course, said no. Vince thought the Wargames match was a WCW thing, and after WCW failed dramatically as its own brand, with the exclusive WCW match between Buff Bagwell and Booker T on Raw, getting booed and being one of the lowest rated matches in Raw history up to that point, Vince did not want anything WCW related on his show that wasn't put with WWF stuff. So Vince said no. Triple H then came up with a match of his own known as the Elimination Chamber, which is a 6-man match inside a domed steel cage with 4 men in pods, 2 men starting it out, and the 4 men coming out at random spots every few minutes. This match has become a WWE staple since then, even gaining its own pay-per-view. Triple H would not have thought of it if Vince McMahon hadn't turned down doing Wargames. Wargames did come to WWE, though, in NXT, which was Triple H, which was the training brand. It was where WWE rookies went and were still training. NXT in 2017 with the pay-per-view NXT Wargames. Triple H was in charge of this, which is probably why Wargames showed up on it first. And it was a colossal hit. Now, when Wargames finally came to WWE, the main show was in 2022, which was after Vince was ousted and Triple H was in charge of creative. And its first match was at Survivor Series because, the Survivor Series typically had 5-on-5 matches, and was the first Wargames match at Survivor Series was a women's Wargames match. Now, typically in the NWA, there were three ways to win a War Games match. There was give up, there was knockout, and there was, what was the other one? Give up, knockout. Man, I studied this, but I don't remember what it was. There was surrender, knockout, sometimes there was escape, but very rarely was it escape. But in WCW, they added pinfalls into the War Games match, and in WWE matches, pinfalls count too. Now, as I said, in WCW, there's a roof on the cage. In the WWF, there is no roof on the cage. Triple H said that the War Games match was they modified it into a new era of War Games because he was tired of seeing the War Games in WCW where they went to slam somebody over their head like a power bomb or something, and their head would hit the roof. So he took the roof off so we could see people diving off the top, stuff like that. And Survivor Series has been the War Games match home since 2022. Now, in AEW has their own War Games match in Blood and Guts. It follows typical War Games rule and has a top on the cage, which we have seen people thrown off the top of the cage in AEW. It is once again a double-sided ring with a cage surrounding it and people entering the cage one at a time. Typically the heels have the advantage. But unlike WCW and WWF, pinfalls do not count. It is surrender, knockout, or whatever the third one was. I don't remember what the third one was. And those are the way to win. I think the reason AEW brought it in was because at the time, Cody Rhodes was an EVP of AEW, an executive vice president, and his father, Dusty Rhodes, invented the match. So they pretty much just changed the name of the match and stuck it in with traditional rules. Which the first Blood and Guts match, which is pretty much a War Games match, was postponed a year in AEW because of COVID. So that is pretty much the history of War Games. It's a long and storied history that have led to two other matches being invented, the Elimination Chamber and AEW Blood and Guts. Blood and Guts is pretty much just a War Games match, and the Elimination Chamber was invented because Vince wouldn't agree to do War Games. Now, for Wednesday's show, I know I promised Santa Stein, but Santa Stein has audio problems, to which I couldn't hear it and would have to turn on subtitles, and I didn't feel like reading a movie. So we're going to do a movie that is so bad, I think we could torture prisoners to it, and they would immediately break during the first showing, Elf Day on Peacock. It has everything you want in a movie. CGI worse than I have ever seen CGI before. A script that I swear was written by an 8-year-old. And an ending where the heroes and villains agreed to just let bygones be bygones and go on their merry little way. So you've got to tune in for this. It is probably the worst movie I've ever seen. Undoubtedly the worst movie I've ever seen. I barely sat through it the first time, and I am not looking forward to watching it again.